Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 127 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've just got after the Europe packs. We've got some interesting new mods coming along, which are pretty cool. But we've got a couple subspecies today we'll be talking about, like I mentioned in the video with the last one, the Eurasian kind of pack that we can talk about the subspecies of Takin. So that's time has come. And then we've got a couple of animals that we get to talk about, which I'm quite excited for. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off with the first subspecies, the nominant subspecies of Takin. So this is Budicaris taxicolor. So this is the nominant subspecies. So the nominant species, subspecies or species is typically what's considered the one that's first described and what's the species is based on. And then you have the subspecies, different ones. So there's about 4 different subspecies of Takin, and they're all based on their color coat. I'm not sure there's been much genetic research to tell how actually different they are from each other, but most of the Takin subspecies are based on coat, which is often a very bad way, but we'll keep going because for consistency. So these guys are endangered antelope, a little bit more endangered than the other subspecies of Takin. They're typically found in India and Myanmar and the Republic of China. They're a subspecies. So the Washimi Takin is found in northeastern India and eats bamboo shoots and willow shoots and bamboo. So not too different in ecology versus the other Takin. It's just kind of the more middle subspecies. And like the other subspecies, they have a oily coat to protect them from the fog. So really cool. And another fact as well, there's quite a few zoos around the world that keeps them. Not quite as common as the nominants, the Sichuan or Tibetan Takin. That's typically the one most commonly found in zoos. But there's a few zoos around the world, like Turnpark Berlin, Beijing Zoo, Portland Wild Animal Park, the Highland Wildlife Park. Across Indonesia, USA as well. Denver Zoological Gardens have them. So quite a worldwide common species. But they are the most endangered of the subspecies of Takin, probably because they live closest to a populated area and have to deal with poaching and habitat loss, which is another big thing. Also, climate change, I imagine, is a big thing since these guys are alpine species. But yeah, really cool. So that's a female there. We'll have a look at the cute little baby. Look at how cute you are. So adorable. Baby Takin are the cutest. I'll have a look at the male and all his hair so you can see the difference. Yeah, there's the male. Look at him. He's a pretty boy. So that's these guys. So the next subspecies, I'm not going to cover the Tibetan Takin because I kind of already covered it with the Eurasia Part 2. Because that is the subspecies the Games one is based on. So here we've got the Bhutan Takin. So this is Budicaris taxicolor whitey. So these are a little bit less endangered and considered vulnerable. So the Bhutan Takin is native, of course, Bhutan, northeastern India, Tibet, and the western parts of China. So a little bit more of an extensive range, kind of like the most eastern. In Bhutan, these guys can be found in bamboo forests in altitude of like 1,000 to 4,500 meters, where they eat grasses, buds, and leaves. They're also diurnal, so they're typically active during the day, where they live in small herds in the winter and then gather up to bigger herds in the summer. So some winter herds can be about 10 to 50 individuals and split the smaller herds, and then often they can be seen in most of the bigger herds as well. And there's actually been a study of the Bhutan Takin in particular, looking at habitat use, and that's been conducted in the Jumador National Park, where they thought was be a stronghold for the Bhutan Takin. And an earlier study of its diet as well concluded that its diet of a summer range showed that Takins are generally a browser, foraging on numerous shoots and forbs. And in China, this subspecies is known to inhabit the Yalong Tisan River along the eastern Himalayas, or along as West Bengal, Paresh, and those kind of areas. So another really cool one. I believe that's the female. Let's have a look at the male here. That's the female again. Here's the male. So you can see the differences in coat color. That one's got the Mushami Takins, like not quite as chocolate as these guys. These guys are a lot more consistent brown. These guys have a little bit more spots to them than a lighter top, as you can see there. And then last but certainly not least, we have got the golden Takin. So that's the last one here. That is Budicaris taxicolor balfoldi. So here's the golden takin. So the golden takin is a threatened subspecies of takin that's found in the Qin Mountains in the south of China's Shaanxi province, and is one of, as I mentioned, the four subspecies. The main way they are told apart from the other subspecies of takin is their quite golden coat, and they're classified due to poaching and habitat loss as vulnerable. And the fur, as you can see on the golden takin, is white or off-white that gives it this golden look. And they've, as I mentioned, the habitats found around China, Burma, Bhutan, and things like that. The golden takins are confined to the Quinlong Mountains, so they're the most eastern population. And because of that small range, they are sensitive to deforestation and hunting. And each spring, like the other subspecies of takin, they will migrate from the tree line. They migrate up the mountain to the tree line and then come back come down as the world gets colder or the winter happens. Let's mention herd size changes. So they're two different terms of ecology, but yeah, these guys are kind of the rarest one, the coolest ones. It's actually believed that the color may have been guided by Jason the Argonauts. The golden fleece may have been inspired by the color of the golden takin, which is quite interesting. You can see the male there, and then the female. Really, really cool. And then you see here the little baby. How cute are they, little baby? Very, very cute. So yeah, those are the three remaining subspecies of takin. So these were all made by Leaf and Nick. All put them in the game because, pretty cool animals, and it's nice to have all the different variation within there. Make some pretty good coats, variation, and pretty easy mods. But yeah, these are all made by Leaf and Nick, Nicholas Lionrider, who's been quite a prolific modder, both quite prolific modders actually, quite a big part of the community. But yeah, really, really awesome. So next up, we're going to stop talking about subspecies now. We have got the Soemmerring Gazelle, done by Leaf and Gaboy. So Gaboy's remade it. This is the Soemmerring Gazelle. So this gazelle, also known as the Abyssinian monarch. These are a gazelle species that are typically found around the Horn of Africa. That includes South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Eritrea. Would you say that? And it was named and just given the binomial name by German physician Philip Jacob Soemmerring. And it was named after, I believe, a German physicist, Samuel Thomas von Soemmerring, or you say that? So that's how it's got his name. Scientific name is formerly a member of the genus Gazelle, which is subgenus Nagar, and it's kind of considered Nagar Soemmerring now. And in terms of where it fits on the family tree, these guys are a little bit more closely related to Grant's and Thompson's gazelles, where they're related to. And the Soemmerring's gazelle being the closest relative between these two species, so they're more closely related to the Grant's gazelle. And there are three subspecies described. There's a Nubian, Somali, and Barani Soemmerring's gazelle. The Nubian one being the type subspecies, Somali one being Berenara, and the Bonoborai gazelle being Buttery. And there's actually a dwarf population on an island that might qualify as a subspecies, but we don't really know. Yeah, anyway, still really cool animals. So in terms of its physical description, these guys are quite a tall gazelle with tan flanks, and they're gradually turning to white on the belly and long black horns as you go along there. They're about 75 to 90 centimeters tall, or about 2 to 3 feet at the shoulder, and weigh about 35 to 45 kilograms, or about 77 to 99 pounds. And Soemmerring's or Grant's gazelles outward appear quite similar, that they're often mistaken for each other, even when their ranges overlap. And as I mentioned, these guys are native to the Horn of Africa. That includes like Djibouti, Somalia, South Sudan. That was extinct in Sudan, which sucks, where they typically inhabit those kind of open steppes, as well as like a few trees and things like that. And at some point in history, they were thought to be isolated on the Dalakabo Island on the archipelago, where they evolved into a dwarf form that could potentially be a subspecies or just another population. But let's look at the female while we have a look. You can see the male's got the bigger, more impressive horns. It's typical of most gazelles. In terms of their diet, these guys are believed to feed on things like acacia and bush leaves and grasses and herbs. And in terms of reproduction, they are typically considered temporarily territorial, which means the males will kind of have a territory while he's looking for females and guarding females. We'll look at the baby, we'll talk about the rest. And they're believed to have a lifespan of up to about 14 years or so. So in terms of their conservation, they are considered vulnerable by the IUCN. Because of many parts of North Africa and the Middle East, large stone corrals have been constructed to drive the herds of gazelle into. That gives them an easy ambush. And this method of hunting actually started back into the prehistoric times and actually still happens now, even in the early 20th century. So shows how efficient some things. Sometimes you just can't reinvent the wheel. But most species of gazelle have been hunted over the course of history, and some of the gazelles are actually very understudied because of their small numbers. And in most parts of their former range, as I mentioned, like Somalia, uh, or Sudan, they are considered endangered or extinct in their range because of habitat destruction and hunting. So very much similar to a lot of other species of gazelle. But yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see Good Boy do a really nice remaster of this guy. Love seeing a good remaster. And you can see the similarities with the Thompson's gazelle. Really, really interesting. All right, so that was Leaf and Good Boy. Next one, we've got another returning modder. We've got a very interesting mod. We've got a bird this time. We have got the Greenwing Macaw, which is done by Great Cake Mods, based on the Capuchin rig, which is really interesting, but actually works surprisingly well, it seems. Let's see if I can get a good one. Obviously, they can't fly, but it seems to climb around and be quite interesting. Though you can't change the sound, so it's obviously giving Capuchin sounds. But it's really, really interesting that we managed to get them on the rig regardless. So very, very interesting. So anyway, so the red and green macaw, or Anna terrace, also known as the green wing macaw, that's what I typically know it as, is a large, mostly green macaw from the genus Aria, and is the largest of its genus. So these guys can be readily distinguished by the scarlet macaw, which is much more common in captivity, by having that. You can see they got the green on their wings, why often scarlet wing macaws kind of have more yellow. And mostly green, or the scarlets have more green, yellowish. Also, their size, they are the second largest type of macaw, or second type of macaw. So they are second only to the hyacinth macaw, which is the big blue one. Adult macaws get to about 90 to 95 centimeters, or about 35 to 37 inches as adults, and average around 1.2 kilograms, with a weight range of just under 1 kilogram to 1.7 kilograms, so quite big. Though while their weight ranges are typically quite similar to the hyacinths, the average weight is slightly surpassed by both the hyacinths and great green macaws, and amongst them, additionally, the kakapo. So kakapo's are the heaviest, but not the longest. So typically, it's kind of kakapo, hyacinth, and then you got your green wings. So it's kind of the third largest of the parrots. The kakapo can get quite huge, like 4 kilograms. But this one cool. So in terms of the other coats, as you can see, they've got that red lines across their face there, very characteristics. That large beak that they're able to crush nuts with, and they actually have cranial kinesis, so they're able to move around their jaws a bit and use them almost like hands, which is really interesting. Same with their claws at their hands there. So they've got zygopodal feet. That means they have kind of 2 toes sticking back and front, and that allows them to grasp branches and grasp objects and be able to move, manipulate things, which is really cool. So in terms of behavior, these guys are very romantic. These guys will mate for life, and they do live very, very long. They can live up for 70, 80 years. Very long-lived. And the typical female lays about 2 to 3 eggs in a nest in a hole in a tree, and the female will incubate her egg for about 28 days, and the chicks fledge about 90 days after hatching. You can see this is what the baby one looks like. It's still got a lot of its down coat, but it's still got some of its adult feathers coming in. So it's really cool interpretation of trying to get a bird in the game. It does look very, very cute, I think. Really cute. Look at this little guy. Anyway, so they are considered least concerned, so they're doing all right. Since 1999, a population actually appeared in Trinidad, although they might have escaped from captivity. They could have potentially flown over and had a wild origin. Historic range typically range from southwards into the Argentine provinces of like the Formosa and the Amazones. They've typically hunted for meat, hunting for meat from these macaws. The pet trade, obviously catching them for pets, and changes in land use have actually caused the species to be extirpated throughout the Argentine range in the 1960s, and it's listed as critically endangered in Argentina. By the mid 2010s, they were actually rediscovered, and they colonized the Isla National Park, and there's been efforts to try and reintroduce them into certain areas, such as the Iberian Provincial Province and things like that. And captive birds for Britain were actually imported to be the founders of these wild birds. And the estimated population is thought to be between 50,000 and 4,999,900. That might be a typo, but I believe probably about 100,000 individuals. That's what typically, maybe about 50 to 100,000 individuals, which is not too bad. That means at least concern. But there are threats, as I mentioned, they were extirpated because of the pet trade, because people love them as pets, and parrots do not make good pets. They live so long, and they are so intelligent. They're like having, if you guys haven't had a toddler, they're like having a toddler for 80 years. So if you don't want that, don't get a macaw. But they are still really beautiful animals. And if you have potentially one or two or an outdoor aviary, you could potentially have them. But they're definitely not for everyone. If you want a bird, get something small. Maybe even a cockatiel, I'd say, is very hard to keep. Something small, maybe even just a quail. Like they're pretty simple. Just chickens. They're great birds, and they're used to being domesticated by humans. So still really, really cool and really interesting mod. It's nice to see some people trying some new things. It is really interesting that we got the macaw. Though I really, really want a kakapo mod. I would die happy we got a kakapo mod because I want an excuse to talk about them because they're so great. But yeah, really, really awesome mod. I am definitely happy with this one. Great Cake Mod's really trying to do something different, and I definitely applaud it. Really, really awesome. Okay, so we're moving on. We got Great Cake Mods doing another animal as well, but this one is not your typical, more experimental. This one's your more typical. We have got the Fisher. So the Fisher is a carnivorous mammal native to North America, and it's a forest-dwelling animal that lives in the boreal forests of Canada and the northern US, and is sometimes referred to as a fisher cat, but it's not a cat, it's a mustelid, so related to wolverines, all that kind of good animals. Related to the American and Pacific marten. They are its closest relatives. So, despite the name Fisher, they're actually not known to eat fish. They believe the name the Fisher came from the word finch, which means the European polecat or pelt of a polecat. So, it's believed to be that Dutch word kind of come from Fisher. So, that's where its names come from. So, it does not because it eats fish, it's because it derives from a word of a different language, which means polecat. So, the species itself, called the Fisher, in terms of evolution, it's believed to have come from North America during the Pliocene, so about 2.5 to 5 million years ago, with some extinct mustelids in the same genus being found in Eastern Asia, with the first true fisher being found in the Middle Pleistocene of North America. And Pea is believed to be around the early Pleistocene, so about 125,000 years ago. And there were three subspecies described, but there's been debate whether they could be potentially identified. So now they're typically considered as monotypic, so there's no different subspecies within them. But yeah, really, really cool. We'll have a look at the albino one. Oh no, we'll have a look at you since you're moving to light. But we've got an albino one that we get to talk about, which is quite cool. So in terms of physical characteristics, they're comparable in size to a domestic cat, with their bodies being long and thin and low to the ground. Their sexes have similar features, but they are sexually dimorphic, with males typically being larger than females. So males typically weigh are about 90 to 120 centimeters long, or about 35 to 47 inches in total, and weigh about 3.5 to 6 kilograms, or 8 to 13 pounds, with females being about 75 to 95 centimeters, or about 37 inches in weight, weigh about 20 to 25 kilograms, and 4 to 6 pounds. So head to body length for both sexes range about 47 to 75 or 19 to 30 inches, with the tail adding a further 20 to 42 centimeters, 12 to 15 inches, and the largest male one being recorded was about 9 kilograms. So typically the fur will change during the season. Oh, we've got the male here who's albino. We'll have a look at you. Their fur will typically change during the season, and it differs slightly between sexes. So typically males have coarser coats, and in early winter they can get quite dense and glossy coats that range from like deep brown to black, and it may be much blacker in an area with white snow just to help protect them as well to get trap heat. From the face, it can have like gold to silver and tricolored hairs, which is also interesting. And then they will bolt in late summer and finishing in November, December is when they get their summer coat. So typically it grows out and then they molt it again. And they also have 5 toes on each foot, and they each have retractable claws that are unsheathed as well. Their feet are large, allows them to be able to move on top of packed snow. They also have 4 central pads on each foot, and on the hind paws they have coarse heads that allow them to get traction on slippery surfaces. They also have highly mobile wrists and ankle joints that are able to rotate their hind paws so they can maneuver and climb down head first from a tree. And actually one of the few mammals that can descend from the top of a tree head first, which is really interesting, which we didn't see there. And they actually have a circular patch of hair on their hind paw that marks they're called palantir glands that give off a distinct odor, and they often will become enlarged during the breeding season. So it's a kind of a sign that they can help them find each other to mate by looking for a scent trail. So in terms of their diet, these guys are generalists, but their most common prey is typically porcupines and snowshoe hares. But they've been known to supplement their diets with insects, nuts, berries, and mushrooms. They've also been observed eating apples. They're typically solitary hunters, but there's been all sorts of their choice prey is typically limited by their size. But there's been a lot of evidence these guys eat lots of small birds, mammals, even deer, and even eating carrion. So they eat deer. And they've also been known to attack larger animals such as turkeys, raccoons, foxes, minks, bobcats, otters, and things like that. And raccoons have actually been known to be killed by fishes as well, and they also chase martens. So they're quite interesting predators as well. And they've been known to kill lynx as well, very occasionally. It's not very seen. And they're actually one of the few predators that sneaks out porcupines, so that kind of allows them to occupy a different niche since they eat porcupines. The stories and literature indicate they can actually flip a porcupine onto its back and scoop out its belly like a ripe melon, though apparently it's exaggerated. But studies show that these guys make repeated biting attacks at the face of the porcupine and just kill it after about 30 minutes or so and then eat. So in terms of reproduction, and while we look at the reproduction, it's got like a cute little baby here. Look at this little cutie, little baby fisher. So typically, the female fisher will begin to breed about 1 year of age, and a reproductive cycle is almost a year long event. So mating will take place in March to early April, with a blastocyst implantation is delayed for 10 months. So they're able to delay their kind of incubation until mid-February, and then the following year they'll become pregnant. And after gestating for about 50 days, the female will give birth to about 1 to 4 kits. And the female then enters estrus about 70 days after that and begins again. So typically females will den in hollow trees, with the kits being born blind, helpless, and partially covered by fine hairs. And the kits begin to crawl after about 3 weeks. And after that 7 weeks, they open their eyes. They start to climb within 8 weeks and completely independent from their mothers about 8 to 10 weeks, where they begin to switch from a solid diet. That's when they're fully dependent on their mother's milk and switch to that. After 4 months, they become intolerant of their litter mates, and at 5 months, their mother pushes them out. And then once they're a year old, they should have adapted to their own range and become full adults. And in terms of their home range and social structure, they're generally crepuscular, so active in dawn and dusk, but they can be active year-round and are solitary, so typically found by themselves, and only hang around with other fishes to mate. And males being more active during mating season, and females less active during pregnancy, and then eventually gradually increases after she gives birth. A fish's range can range from about 6 kilometers or 3 square miles in the summer to 14 kilometers or 5 square miles in the winter. The ranges of up to 20 kilometers have been found, depending on the quality of the habitats. There's a little bit of things like that. And male and female fishes will have overlapping territories, with this behavior being imposed by females during the dominance by the male's dominance, and obviously the male's desire to increase his mating success. So in terms of predators, these guys have not got any regular predators, but they've been known to be eaten by bears, coyotes, golden eagles, bald eagles, lynxes, mountain lions, wolverines, and potentially great horned owls. So they do have some predators, but not regular predators. In terms of their habitat, they are complete tree climbers. They do spend most of their time on the forest floor. They like extensive conifer forests, typically a boreal forest. They prefer areas of greater than 80% cover and avoid areas with less than 50% cover of trees. And they like those old growth forests that have large trees for denning, and forests that have been heavily logged to kind of avoid those as well. But luckily they have a wide habitat, so there's lots of areas to find those kind of habitats. Fishes are typically found widespread across the northern forests of the US. So they're found in boreal and mixed detritus deciduous conifer forests that run across Canada to Nova Scotia, east of the Pacific shore to British Columbia and north of Alaska. Looks to be found as far north as the Great Slave Lake in the Northwest Territories, and as far south as Oregon. And they're actually isolated populations of the Sierra Nevada of California near England, also found in the Appalachian Mountains and Virginia. But sadly, they were mostly widely eliminated from the southern and eastern part of their range, including most American states and eastern Canada and Nova Scotia, because of overtrapping and loss of forest habitat. But most states have placed restrictions on trapping of fishes by the 1930s, and also there was an end of the logging boom around the 1930s as well. So there's been lots of forest regrowth around those areas as well, and because of the trapping, they have recovered to a point where they're no longer endangered just by not hunting them and not cutting down their habitat. They're actually doing much better now, so they've recovered. Between 1955 and 1985, they actually were kind of allowed limited trapping, but populations have increased of porcupines. And other areas, fishes were reintroduced by releasing adults in these areas to help control porcupine numbers as well. So there has been not that much in terms of conservation effort, but just letting nature do its thing, these guys have recovered in those areas, which is quite cool. And scattered populations now exist in the Pacific Northwest, though I believe there's probably some reintroductions and stuff trying to help them in southern parts of their range, which is quite cool. And recent studies show that fishes have begun making inroads of suburban backyards, which is not good. And they've been found north, south is like Connecticut, Iowa, and even New Jersey, which is quite interesting. And been found in Cape Cod, have virtually disappeared after construction of the Cape Cod Canal in the 1900s. They have actually been in the area. So while they have recovered and actually re-established a lot of the areas in the southern US and southern Canada that they've kind of been extirpated from, they're coming back. They've made a pretty good comeback, which is pretty cool. And humans, as I mentioned, we had quite a big relationship with them. So fur trading kind of started, and then they were obviously that was led to over trapping. So the best pelts are from the winter trapping, so that's when they kind of get them. The price for pelts has actually varied considerably. So in the 1920s and 1930s, they were highest at about $100, and now there was in 1999 there was 16,000 pelts sold for about $27 for a pelt of a fisher, just because there's not much demand. And during the 1900 1940, they were considered near extinct in the southern parts of their range because they're over trapping, but they were nearly, as I mentioned before. But luckily they were limited, and then they've kind of brought it back. But luckily they have closed seasons, reintroductions, and habitat recovery has actually really helped them recover. So really good conservation story. Also, a lot have been captivity. They've been captured live for milk farmings, but they were popular. They thought to apply to fishes, but farming them is difficult. So they typically weren't farmed. Got a little bit harder to breed. And most fisher farms are closed by the 1940s. So there's typically not many around. If they are, they're very niche and very small. They've also been bred in zoos, but not common zoo species, because they're poor exhibits animal, because they like to hide, and they are very difficult. They're susceptible to many diseases in captivity. But yet there are examples of them living up to 10 years or 14 years in captivity, which is well beyond their natural lifespan of about 7 years in the wild. It's quite interesting. And there was also a scientist in 1974 that raised two pups to kind of perform research. He raised two kits, and his primary interest was to be able to measure activity to determine how much food the animals required to function. And he kind of had a look at that and compared them to darts and things like that. But sadly, one of them died, which is also sad. But also relationships, they can be a pest for farmers because they get into chicken coops and prey on cats and small dogs. However, that seems to be pretty small, though that may be rising because they're coming more into towns. But also as well, poisoning. There's been some efforts of poisoning with rodenticides to getting into these guys and cause populations decline, which is a bad thing. But yeah, really, really cool animals. Do love the fisher. Another great cake mod. And we got to have a look at these cute little babies. Where are they? Where did they go? There they are. Look at this little cutie. Look at that little cutie. Yosemite. Look at that little cutie. Like T-posing for whatever reason. Very cute, but awesome. Okay, so last but certainly not least, this one's done by Good Boy and Genoa Pizza. A good old duo. We've got the Mexican wolf, or the Mexican gray wolf, also known as the Lobo. So really cool. There are subspecies of gray wolf that is native to the southeastern Arizona and southern New Mexico in the United States, and also northern Mexico. It did actually used to live in Texas. So we'll talk about a little about their history. They were first described as distinct subspecies in 1929 because of their small size and pelt. And in terms of their lineage, the grey wolves came to US from Eurasia at about 70,000 to 23,000 years ago and gave rise to many different kind of groups. There was the Beringia wolf, which is kind of a big one that lived in Beringia, and then the modern ancestor of all the modern subspecies of population of wolves in the US today. So during genetics, these guys are believed to be likely the first grey wolves to cross the Bering Land Bridge during the late Pleistocene, colonizing most of America until the Great Plains wolf subspecies kind of colonized it and pushed them southwards. So halotype and groups of genes suggest these guys are actually quite basal as well. And so the diversity of wolves is actually more than twice of the northern population because of culling, which is they were much more genetically diverse back then. And some holotypes were unique, such as the Mexican wolf, the Great Plains wolf, and the extinct southern Rocky Mountain wolf, were found to form a southern clade of wolves in North America. And these guys kind of represent that last one. And North American wolves actually come from Eurasia, except the southern clade that came exclusively to North America. So they're a unique North American group of wolves genetically, which is quite interesting. And other studies looking into like morphology, things like that, there were bones of like dire wolves, Beringia wolves, things like that. And it shows that the late Pleistocene wolf in southern limb morphology is actually quite common with the Beringian wolves. And then modern wolves kind of had longer legs, and that's where these guys kind of came in as well. With the ancestor of these guys believing to be the extinct Beringian wolf being an ancestor of the southern wolf clade. So these guys are directly from the Beringian wolf, or the first one to kind of evolve. And those southern ones are the kind of a relic of that population. That includes the Mexican wolf and the Great Plains wolf. So they're the most ancestral group of grey wolves that live in North America. So these were the first. They were the first wolves to colonize North America, and they hold out today in the most southern parts of North America as the other groups more northernly took over. So these guys are kind of the earliest ones, which is quite cool. A little bit. That's why they're important to preserve. And they have been known hybridizing with species such as coyotes and other wolves. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests that they hybridized with other subspecies of wolves as well. As part of management and genetic swap. And naturally, they are the same species, so there are hybrid zones, and it's never perfect. They're never going to exactly be a divide, usually unless it's like a mountain range or an ocean. So there is going to be a lot of breeding between the different populations. So there's a bit of a mix there, or genetic swap. So there would be hybridization between the subspecies freely, because a wolf could walk wherever it wanted, not a big drama. But that's just naturally what happens with populations. So there would have been hybridization with areas, like especially more northern populations of Mexican wolves as they encountered other populations or subspecies of wolf, which is quite interesting. So there's a lot of interbreeding there. But unlike eastern wolves and red wolves, they actually really interbreed with coyotes. But they have been never explicitly observed, that there have been some evidence of in their DNA of them breeding with coyotes. But it seems these guys didn't really have the same kind of breeding with coyotes that the more northern wolves, like the eastern and red wolves, which may have been a product of a species that was a product of hybridization between grey wolves and coyotes. It wasn't as obvious there. It may have happened, but not quite as obvious. So these guys are a little bit more descended from a more pure, quote-unquote pure population, or more basal population that hasn't bred much with coyotes and other wolves as much as a lot of other ones, which is quite interesting. And there's actually no evidence as well of dogs interbreeding with them as well. So these guys are relatively there's less than like 10% coyote egg mixture. So they're not pure, but they're kind of the wolf population least affected with, or less bred with coyotes and wolves, coyotes and dogs. So that's quite interesting as well. Probably because they're so endangered and the areas they live in are so remote, could be an example. But in terms of their distribution, these guys historically would have lived through southeastern Arizona, New Mexico, western Texas, and into Mexico, where they would have lived in the Meridian kind of pine oak woodlands and deserts as well. And they've been really widely found around those areas. Luckily today, because of conservation and reintroductions, they can be found across western New Mexico and eastern Arizona as part of the wolf management plan. They've also been reintroduced into Mexico, so there's a lot of good conservation work going on with them. But historically, they were considered a really important... let's have a look at my one over here. They were considered a really important, held in high regard by pre-Columbian Mexico cultures, where they were a symbol of a war and the sun. And they actually tried to crossbreed them a lot with dogs to produce temperamental but loyal guardians. They also sacrificed for rituals and things like that. But sadly, there was a rapid decline of wolves in the southwestern United States about 1915 to 1920 due to livestock losses of wolves actually being rare. They cost one range from millions in a year, but because of people, they kind of wiped them out. There was believed to be 103 Mexican wolves in New Mexico. By 1917, they reduced to 45 a year later, and then it became extinct. And throughout the 1950s, because of trapping and poison and guns, people were killing them until the last wild wolves were shot in Texas in 1970. And sadly, they kind of put them in extinction in Texas. But they persisted longer in Mexico, but there was human settlement, ranching, and predator removal came later in those areas, and they declined around the 1930s, 1940s. relying on the same medicines like 1080. They use 1080, which is a common poison, especially in New Zealand for dealing with mammals. But luckily, we were able to step in and save them. So they were listed as an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act in 1976, with the Mexican Wolf Recovery Team being founded 3 years after that. And they founded the recovery plan, the Mexican Wolf Recovery Plan, which caused the re-establishment for at least 100 wolves in the historical range through a captive breeding program. So this is a great example of how zoos can save species and are very important in that. So between 1977 and 1980, 4 males and a pregnant female were captured in Durango and Chihuahua, something like Chihuahua in Mexico, to act as founders for this new certified line, with the lineages also being brought in. But due to the low number of founders, they're believed to be a risk of inbreeding. However, cross-lineage wolves have less inbreeding coefficients and greater reproductive success than purebred lines. So with the addition of new lineages and things like that, the captive Mexican wolf population has actually rise to about 178 individuals, with these captive bred animals being released in Apache National Park in eastern Arizona, and also being allowed to realize parts of Arizona and Mexico. And the lack of livestock-free zones and tolerance of the captive wolves outside these restoration areas have been quite challenging, since they are doing well, but because farmers don't really like wolves because they eat their livestock, which is fair enough, but that's something we really need to help because there's not actually that much killing of livestock by wolves. It's kind of more of a boogeyman, but it does happen. That's been a big challenge for their conservation, and they've been trying to release them in more areas that are more free. But by late 2012, it's believed there's 75 wolves and 4 breeding pairs in kind of this area, and since 1998, there's been 92 wolf deaths recorded. Due to illegal shootings and things like that, which is a little bit sad. But most of them were kind of natural. And we had the first wild-born wolf litter in Mexico reported in 2014, so that's a big success. So luckily, it has been a big success coming up. And even in March 2021, a family of 9 Mexican grey wolves with breeding pair of wolves and their 7 pups were released into the wilds of northern Mexico, bringing the total number of Mexican wolves to 40. And that shows they're actually doing pretty well. And captive-born wolves typically are released with and it's a family unit with captive pups who are less than 14 days old can be released with their parents and raised as wild wolves. And even been used as kind of 22 pups are actually placed in wild dens as surrogates using wild fostering or cross fostering, which is quite interesting as well. So what we know now is the current population as of March the 9th, 2022. 2 breeding pairs were spotted and released in the wild in Chihuahua in northwestern Mexico. That brings the total population in the country of Mexico 35 to 44 individuals. I believe globally, or kind of in the US as well, there is about 241 wolves in the US as of February the 28th, 2023. 241 wolves with 40 packs or 136 wolves living in New Mexico, 105 or 19 packs living in Arizona, with a pupping survival rate of 67%. Also, 109 wolves of the population, or about 45% of the population, are collared and monitored as well. So that's pretty good. And the total captive population as well is about 380 individuals through 60 different facilities. So they are doing quite well, at least. There's a few hundred, less than 1,000, and a lot in captivity, which is good. So this shows how conservation efforts like this. The Mexican grey wolf is a great example, but there's also the California condor, a great example of how breeding and captivity helps these species. And the plan has actually been revised. So typically it's been revised to the recovery plan. So they want to grow a stable population in the next 8 years of about 320 individuals in the wild, and either try and do that through reintroduction and allowing available genetics and mixing them as well. So the same criteria is actually in place for Mexico, expecting about 200 wolves. So there's lots of big plans, and hopefully we will get them. But enough about their conservation. We're going to talk a little bit about their habitat and ecology and all that. So these guys, primarily like other wolves, prey on large ungulates such as rocky-routed mountain elk, being about 76 to 80% of their prey, but they also prey on mule deer, peccaries, white-tailed deer, and sometimes domestic cattle in parts of their range, but typically avoid them. They compete with mountain lions, black bears, cougars, bobcats, coyotes, those kind of animals, grizzly bears. Historically, they would have competed with jaguars and grizzly bears as they lived in their range, but Hopefully, with their introductions, they might have to do that again because I'm very interested in rewilding. In terms of their habitat, these guys are typically found in the the Gila National Forest. So it's kind of like a lot of woodland and things like that, but some kind of more deserty areas, aspen areas as well. So kind of similar. The aspen research shows that Mexican wolves have not yet altered the elk behavior in the same way they did in Yellowstone National Park because they still have a relatively small population. So hopefully when they become more popular, we'll get the same effects on that national park that we got with Yellowstone and the wolves introduction, which is quite interesting. And the habitat itself contains at least 537 plant and animal species. This habitat also includes squirrels, ringtails, pronghorns, bighorn sheep, all sorts of birds such as Mexican spotted owls and bald eagles, tundra swans, songbirds, all sorts of different animals, like bull snakes, rattlesnakes, spiny lizards, beaded lizards as well. It was really cool. So yeah, really interesting habitat and really cool conservation story with the Mexican wolf. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. Again, done by Gaboy and General Pizza. Did a really great job with the Mexican wolf. I know we get a lot of wolf subspecies, but I know everyone loves wolves, so I love talking about them. And plus, these guys have such a cool conservation history and evolutionary history as well, being the kind of earliest population, the descendants of the earliest wolves to populate the Americas or North America is really, really cool. So I like talking about these guys. But yeah, also critically endangered because we love a good conservation story, don't we? So yeah, we'll have a look at the babies. Look at these little cuties, little friends, little adorable little pups, little puppies. I love puppies. It's so cute. Anyway, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoy this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.